The bullet hole was already in the wall when Zuri walked in. Clean edges. Still warm if you pressed a finger to it, which she didn't, because the man standing 6 feet away from her was watching her with the kind of stillness that made every small decision feel like a test. Nobody had told her about the bullet hole. Nobody had told her about a lot of things. She set her cleaning supplies down without rushing, kept her face neutral, moved to the far wall and began working the way she always did, methodically, quietly, like a woman who had learned a long time ago that the less space you took up, the more you got to see. The room was part of the private east wing of the Itaewon estate, a space most of the staff had never entered. She had been here 8 days. 8 days of marble floors, cameras that tracked movement before it happened, and men in dark suits who never laughed, never relaxed, and never looked directly at the help. 8 days of learning that the silence in this house wasn't natural. It was maintained. If you are new here, welcome. This channel is where real stories live. The kind that don't let you breathe until the last second. Hit that subscribe button right now because what happens in this house is going to change everything you think you know about power, trust, and the people nobody sees coming. The estate sat behind guarded gates in the hills above Itaewon, hidden from every tourist map and kept off every social media feed by agreements nobody talked about out loud. From the outside it looked like old money with good taste. From the inside it felt like a system with a pulse, everything calibrated, everything timed, nothing left to chance. His name was Han Seo-jun. Zuri had not spoken to him directly yet. She had seen him twice in passing. Both times from a distance, both times surrounded by men who moved when he moved and stopped when he stopped, like extensions of his body rather than separate people. He was not loud. He was not dramatic. He communicated power the way the ocean communicates depth, not by showing you the bottom, but by making sure you understood you couldn't see it. The bullet hole in the wall was directly behind where his desk chair sat, meaning whoever fired it had been aiming for the back of his head. Meaning someone in this house, or someone with access to it, had already tried once. Zuri kept cleaning. Her hands were steady. Her mind was not. Because the part that scared her wasn't the hole itself. It was the fact that it had been painted over. Badly. Quickly. Like someone had tried to hide it in a hurry and hadn't had time to do it right. Which meant it hadn't happened long ago. Which meant it could happen again. She was working her way toward the window when she felt it. That specific shift in the air that happened whenever he entered a space. She had noticed it the first time without understanding what she was reacting to. By the second time she had mapped it precisely. The conversations that died, the footsteps that slowed, the breathing in the room that became careful. She didn't turn around. She heard him stop just inside the doorway. Silence. Then his voice, low and completely level. You see it. It wasn't a question. Zuri turned slowly. He was standing in the doorway in a dark suit, no tie, both hands at his sides. His eyes were on the wall. On the patch of paint that didn't quite match the rest. She didn't answer right away. He looked at her. And the thing that ran through her chest in that moment wasn't fear. It was something colder and more precise than fear. It was the understanding that she was no longer invisible. Come to my private quarters tonight, he said. He didn't explain. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked away, and the air in the room rearranged itself around his absence like water closing over a stone. Zuri stood completely still for 4 full seconds. Then she looked back at the bullet hole. And the question that settled in her gut, quiet, cold, and impossible to ignore, was not whether she would go. It was why, out of every person in that house, he had chosen her. Before the next chapter drops, tell me in the comments. Do you think Zuri should go to those private quarters? Or is walking into that room the biggest mistake of her life? She went. Not because she wasn't afraid. Because she had learned, the hard way, in a city that didn't forgive hesitation, that the decision you make when you're afraid is the one that defines you. Zuri Adeyemi had been making those decisions since she was 11 years old. Lagos had taught her the first rule: see everything, react to nothing. In the neighborhood where she grew up, the kids who drew attention to themselves were the ones who disappeared. Not violently, worse. Gradually. Absorbed into situations they hadn't chosen, shaped by people who had noticed them before they were ready to be noticed. Her mother used to press a hand to Zuri's chest before she left for school and say, "The eye that blinks too slow misses the blade." She had never blinked slowly. By the time her aunt brought her to Atlanta at 15, she had already developed what she privately called the map, a continuous, automatic process of recording space. Entry points, exit points, who held authority in a room and who only performed it, where the gaps were in any system, because every system had them. You just had to be patient enough and quiet enough to find them. She had found 3 in the Itaewon estate inside her first week. The security rotation shifted every 3 days, not weekly like standard practice. That kind of irregular scheduling prevented guards from memorizing their own blind spots, which was smart. But it also meant no single guard ever fully knew the grounds. They learned their zones and nothing beyond them. The North Wing had someone living in it who didn't appear on any staff briefing. Twice that week she had seen a guard exit that corridor carrying a food tray, face blank, moving with the careful speed of a person who had been told not to be noticed. And the East Corridor had a panel behind the large oil painting near the main staircase. The paint around its edges was 3 shades newer than the surrounding wall. Whoever had installed it had done so recently and in a hurry. Not a decorative panel. A door. She had walked past it every day without slowing down, without looking at it longer than a passing glance required. She had added it to the map and kept moving. Because here was the thing about systems, and this was the thing most people never understood: you didn't probe a crack the moment you found it. You watched it. You waited to see who else knew it was there. You let the system reveal itself on its own timeline. Systems don't fail on their own. They get exposed by the people inside them. She was thinking about the panel as she walked the corridor that evening, heading toward the private wing for the first time. The hallway that led there was longer than it looked on a floor plan. Assuming you had ever seen a floor plan, which she had not, which meant she was building one in real time with every step. The other staff had stopped asking her questions after the 3rd day. There had been a brief window, the first 2, where a few of them had tried. Small talk in the kitchen, carefully phrased inquiries about where she was from and how she'd found the position. She had answered pleasantly and briefly and given them nothing to work with. They had stopped. People always did, eventually. What she had not expected was for him to start. The guard at the entrance to the private wing looked at her once, then looked at his phone, then stepped aside without a word. Which meant he had been told. Which meant Seo-jun had planned this precisely enough to notify his own security before she arrived. That told her more than anything he had said in that room. She rounded the last corner. The moment she fully understood what she was standing inside. Not a wealthy man's home but a running operation with layers she had only just begun to count, was the same moment she reached his door. She raised her hand to knock. And from inside the room, before her knuckles touched wood, his voice reached her. "It's open." Zuri's hand stilled in the air. He had known she was there before she knocked. Which meant the hallway had sensors she hadn't mapped yet. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, and nothing about what she saw next matched the house she thought she had been working in. Drop a comment right now. What do you think is waiting for her on the other side of that door? The room looked like a man who had given up pretending. No gold. No display. No furniture arranged to make visitors feel small. Just clean lines, dark wood, and a single shelf of books with worn spines. The kind of worn that came from reading, not decoration. The floor-to-ceiling window took up the entire far wall, and through it the city pressed its face against the glass. Amber lights, distant traffic, a skyline too indifferent to care about what happened in the hills above it. Han Seo-jun stood at that window with his back to her. Zuri stepped inside. Closed the door. Stayed near it. He didn't turn around immediately. He let the silence run for a long beat. Not to be dramatic, she understood, but because silence was his first language and he defaulted to it the way other people defaulted to words. "You didn't hesitate," he said finally. "About coming?" "About the wall." He turned then, and in the lower light of the private room he looked different from every version of himself she had observed before. The corridor version was architecture. Cold, structural, designed to be seen and interpreted correctly. This version was the thing underneath the architecture. Still controlled. Still precise. But the performance had been set down somewhere near the door. Most people see something they shouldn't and make themselves small. You kept working. Stopping would have told you more, Zuri said. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. Recognition. Sit, he said. I'm fine standing. The pause. Then he moved to his desk and lowered himself into the chair, elbows on the armrests, fingers loosely linked. He watched her the way she had seen him watch everything, like he was reading something that hadn't been written yet. How long before you understood what this place was? He asked. Zuri looked at him evenly. Day 2. And you stayed. The money was good. He almost smiled. That's not why. She said nothing. He leaned forward by 1 inch, the most animated she had seen him. You stayed because you were reading it. You're still reading it. Right now, standing at that door, you're calculating how many ways out of this room exist and which one costs the least. He tilted his head slightly. Am I wrong? Zuri didn't answer that. I need you to stay here tonight, he said. The shift in topic was seamless. No transition, no softening. Like a door opening directly into another room. Not for anything you're thinking. I need a body in this room that isn't being paid to lie to me. Every person you employ is paid, she said. Including me. You're paid to clean floors. Not to report on them. He held her gaze. That's the difference. Outside, the city moved on without them. A siren rose somewhere below and faded. A light across the valley went dark. Zuri studied the room one more time. The panel on the left wall, she clocked it immediately, different wood grain from the surrounding surface, hinged on the right side. An exit she hadn't had on her mental map until this second. She added it. This isn't what it looks like, he said quietly. I know, she said. If it was what it looked like, you wouldn't have chosen me. This time, the thing that crossed his face was not recognition. It was something rarer. Respect. She crossed the room. Sat in the chair near the window. Far enough to be professional, close enough that the choice meant something. He watched her settle without comment. Why the bullet hole? She asked. The room changed temperature. He looked at her for a long moment without speaking. And in that silence she saw it. Not the answer, but the shape of what the answer would cost him to give. That's not a question a maid asks, he said finally. No, Zuri agreed. It's not. Another silence. Then, quietly, with a precision that felt like it had been measured, the only one I can trust. Zuri frowned slightly. What? He looked at her directly. His voice did not waver. You're the only one here I can trust. The words landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water, ripples moving outward into everything that came after. She let them settle. Then she asked the only question that mattered. Why me? He unlinked his fingers. Looked at his hands for a moment. Looked back up. And what crossed his face next? Not power, not control, not the managed blankness of a man who had built an empire on being unreadable, was something she had not expected to find in this house. Exhaustion. Real, deep, ground-down exhaustion. Because, he said quietly, you're the only one here who isn't afraid of me. Tell me what you think. Has a powerful person ever trusted you when no one else would? Drop your story in the comments. Zuri almost laughed. Not to be rude. Not even consciously. It came up from somewhere honest. The kind of reaction that happens when something said out loud is so far from the truth that the body rejects it before the mind can intervene. You think I'm not afraid of you, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a correction. Seo Jun studied her. I think you're the only one here who doesn't let fear make your decisions. The room went quiet again. Not uncomfortable quiet, something more layered than that. The quiet of two people who had both learned, separately and in very different worlds, that silence was not empty. That silence was where the real information lived. Zuri leaned back slightly in the chair and looked at him straight on. What happened to the person who fired that shot? That question has an answer you don't want. Try me. He was quiet for 3 seconds. They're no longer a concern. She heard what he didn't say and filed it away precisely. And the person who let them in? His jaw tightened, barely, the smallest muscular shift, but she caught it. Still being determined. So it wasn't external. No. Inside access. Yes. And you've been running a house full of people, one of whom helped someone try to put a bullet in your head, and you don't know which one. She kept her voice even. Not accusatory. Factual. How long ago? 5 days. 5 days. She had arrived 8 days ago. Which meant 3 days before she set foot in this house, someone in it had already decided he needed to die. She sat with that for a moment. And tonight, she said slowly, you called me in here? Yes. Not your second in command. Not your security chief. Not anyone who's been with you for years. She held his gaze. Me. 8 days in. Yes. Why? He stood from behind the desk, not aggressively, just shifting the energy in the room, and moved to the window. The city below had deepened into full night now. More lights, more distance, the sprawl of a city that held 1,000 secrets without effort. Because everyone I've trusted for years is now a variable, he said, his back half to her. Every person who has access to this building, who knows my schedule, who has been with me long enough to know what I value and how I think. He stopped. They all had the same information. And one of them used it. He turned back to her. You walked into this house after it happened. You didn't arrive carrying prior knowledge. You didn't arrive carrying loyalty to anyone already inside. You arrived carrying nothing except, he paused. Whatever it is you actually are. Zuri kept her face still. That's a strange reason to trust someone. It's the only clean reason left. She considered that. There was a logic to it she couldn't argue with, which made it more unsettling, not less. A man who trusted strategically rather than emotionally had stripped everything back to the only variable he could be certain about: timing. She was here after the breach. Therefore she wasn't the breach. It was cold reasoning. It was also not wrong. Trust wasn't a word in your world before 5 days ago, she said. He looked at her. No. So this isn't trust, Zuri said. This is calculation. You're not trusting me. You're placing a bet on a variable you can't fully predict because every other variable has already failed you. He was quiet for a long time. Then simply, yes. And you're telling me this. Because you already knew it. He said it without apology. And because a person who already knows the truth and stays anyway is the closest thing to trust I'm going to find tonight. Powerful men didn't admit fear. She had known that since she was old enough to observe them in Lagos, in Atlanta, in every room she had quietly mapped and memorized. Fear existed in them the same as anyone else. The difference was the cost of showing it. For men like Seo-jun, fear was a weapon handed to your enemy the moment you let it surface. He was showing it now. Not fully. Not openly. But enough for her to see it, which meant he had made a precise and calculated decision to let her. She looked at the left wall panel again. Still clocked it? Still filed it? What do you want from me tonight, specifically? She asked. Be here, he said. Stay awake. If something in this room changes, sound, air pressure, temperature, anything, tell me before it completes. You think they'll come again? I think, he said quietly, that whoever sent the first one knows it didn't work. And people who plan at that level don't stop after one failure. Zuri looked at the panel on the left wall. The same wood grain issue she had spotted in the east corridor. Newer than the surrounding surface. Hinged on the right. But this panel, this one was different from the others she had catalogued. This one had a very faint gap at the bottom edge. Not a design gap. A gap that opened from the other side. Her eyes moved to Seo-jun. He was still watching her. Something, he said, reading her face. I don't know yet, she said carefully. But in her chest, something had just clicked into place. Quiet, cold, and completely certain. She was looking at the way in. Drop a comment. Do you think she tells him what she just noticed? Or does she keep it to herself? She didn't tell him. Not because she was hiding it. Because she needed 3 more minutes to be sure. And in a house like this, saying a wrong thing out loud was more dangerous than saying nothing at all. Zuri had learned that in Lagos, sharpened it in Atlanta, and confirmed it every single day she had spent inside these walls. Information spoken too early was information given away. So she kept her face level and her body still and watched the panel from the corner of her attention while the rest of her stayed present in the conversation. Seo-jun had returned to his desk. Not working. The monitors were dark, just occupying the space with the deliberate calm of a man who had trained himself to look at ease even when he wasn't. She could see the difference now that she was looking for it. The way his shoulders held tension 2 inches higher than relaxed. The slight stillness in his right hand that said he hadn't fully let go of something. He was waiting. Not for her to speak. For something outside this room to move. "You've been sleeping in here," she said. He looked at her. The chair. The angle of it. She nodded toward the reading chair on the far wall. "The cushion is compressed on the left side only. That's where someone's head goes when they're sleeping upright." She paused. "Since the attempt? The beat? For nights. Not your bedroom. My bedroom is the most predictable place in this building. And this room is less predictable? This room has 6 exits," he said. "My bedroom has 1. 6. She had found 4. She recounted without moving: door, window, left wall panel, the floor seam near the bookshelf she had noted on entry. She had missed 2. She filed that. "What did they use?" she asked. "For the shot." "Suppressed. 9mm. He said it with the flatness of a man reciting a weather report. "Fired through the panel in the east corridor. Traveled through a service gap in the wall structure. Hit 6 inches left of center." He looked at the painted patch without expression. "I had moved to pour tea. 6 inches. She let that land. 6 inches was the difference between this conversation and a different kind of room entirely," she said. "I don't usually take it that late." He said it like a man still processing the significance of small habits. "I was tired." Zuri was quiet for a moment. Outside, wind moved through the courtyard. She heard it push against the window. A low, sustained pressure, then release. "The panel in this room," she said finally. "The one on the left wall." He went completely still. "I see it," she said. "Gap at the bottom. Not a design gap, pressure gap. It opens from the other side." She looked at him directly. "Who built it?" "My previous head of construction." He said it slowly. "Who has been with me for 11 years. Who has access to the schematics for this room?" The stillness in his face deepened into something she had no word for. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the expression of a man watching a structure he built with his own hands begin to show the shape of its own collapse. "For people," he said. 3 of whom you now have to consider as variables." He looked at her. "The 4th being you," she said. He said nothing. "You built a system around controlling information," Zuri said carefully, not unkindly. "And someone inside that system has been studying how you control it. Long enough to know the gaps. Long enough to map the same things I mapped, but from the inside." She paused. "This isn't a leak. It's a mirror. Someone learned your architecture and built a counter to it." The room held it. Seo-jun was quiet for a long time. Not processing, he had already processed. She could see it in the particular quality of his stillness, the kind that came after understanding arrived and before a decision followed it. He was deciding what to do with what he now knew. "Trust wasn't a risk I ever took," he said quietly. "Not genuinely. Every relationship inside this operation was structured, designed, even the ones that looked organic." He looked at her. "I calculated who to bring close and how close. I gave people access in proportion to what I needed from them. I thought that was how you protected yourself." "It is," Zuri said, "until the person inside the structure knows the structure better than you do." He looked at the panel. She looked at it too. Neither of them moved. The wind outside pressed against the window again. And then, faint, almost nothing, but wrong. A sound from behind the left wall panel. Not a creak. Not a settling sound. Something deliberate. The specific, compressed sound of weight being shifted by a person trying very hard not to make noise. Zuri's whole body went tight. She looked at Seo-jun. His eyes had gone completely flat. He heard it too. Her hand moved to the arm of her chair. Her weight shifted forward to the balls of her feet. The panel gap at the bottom widened by 2 millimeters. Then stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. Because someone was on the other side of that wall. And they were waiting too. Comment right now, do you think they make it out of this room alive? Tell me what you think happens next. The panel exploded inward. Not slowly. Not dramatically. It came off the wall like it had been kicked by something that didn't care about the noise, and 3 men poured through the gap in tight formation, black-clad, masked, moving with the kind of precision that only came from rehearsal. Zuri was already moving. She crossed the room in 3 steps, grabbed Seojun's arm with both hands, and pulled him off the chair and down behind the desk in one hard motion, and the shot that followed took out the window directly above where his head had been. Glass exploded outward into the night. Cold air rushed in through the gap like the city itself had exhaled. Stay low. Her voice was flat. No panic. Pure instruction. Seojun hit the floor and stayed there. Not because he was told. Because something in the way she moved, the speed of it, the absence of hesitation, communicated a clarity that overrode everything else in the room. She pressed her back to the side of the desk and assessed. 3 men. The first covered the door. The second moved toward the desk. The third held the panel gap, blocking re-entry, cutting the obvious escape. Coordinated. They weren't sweeping the room looking for a target. They already knew exactly where he sat. They came to finish something. And they knew exactly where to go. The second man reached the corner of the desk and Zuri moved before he rounded it. Low, fast, driving her shoulder into his midsection and pushing his weapon arm up as the shot fired into the ceiling. The sound cracked through the room. Her ears rang. She used his momentum, twisted, and put him into the edge of the desk hard enough that the impact took the fight out of him for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. The floor, she said sharply. Seojun was already pressing the release, a panel she hadn't mapped, flush with the baseboard, operated by thumb pressure. A section of the floor lifted 2 inches with a hydraulic hiss. The first man was moving toward them. Zuri grabbed Seojun's collar and they dropped into the passage below simultaneously, and the hatch sealed above them with a sound like a vault closing, and the room above went muffled. Shouting, footsteps, the crash of furniture, and then nothing. Darkness. Narrow concrete walls. The smell of old air and damp stone. A single red emergency strip along the floor, just enough light to see 2 feet ahead. Seojun breathed hard beside her. Controlled breathing, deliberate, trained, but hard. Move, she said. He moved. She followed, one hand on the wall, reading the passage with her fingertips as they went. 12 feet. A turn. 15 more feet. Another turn. The floor sloped gently downward, sub-basement level, she calculated. Below the foundation line. How far does this run? She asked. 40 meters. Comes up in the utility room beneath the kitchen. Who built it? I did. Personally. No contractors. No documentation. His voice was tight. 3 people know it exists. Zuri kept moving. 3 is too many. He didn't respond. Because they both understood what that meant. If 3 people knew and the attackers had come through the panel rather than this passage, it meant they hadn't found the passage yet. Which gave them minutes, not seconds. But the word yet was doing a lot of work in that sentence. They didn't come to threaten, she said as they moved. The formation, the timing, the access point, this was finalized. Someone told them your exact position in that room at that exact hour. Seojun was quiet for 4 full steps. I know, he said. Which means someone in your circle knew you'd be in that room tonight. Another pause. Only one person knew I'd changed my schedule, he said. The passage ended at a steel ladder. Seojun went up first. Zuri followed, and they emerged through a hatch into a dark utility room. Pipes, generator equipment, shelving units. The sounds of the house above filtered down distorted and directionless. He pulled the hatch shut and locked it. Then he stood still. And for the first time since the panel came off the wall, she saw it cross his face. Not fear of the men upstairs, not the adrenaline aftermath of almost dying. Something heavier. The weight of a name he hadn't said yet. Drop a comment. Who do you think told them where he'd be? One person knew. One person. Who is it? Seo Jun moved through the utility room without turning on a light. That told Zuri everything. He had memorized this space, not casually, not as an afterthought, but the way a person memorizes something they have already imagined needing. He moved around the generator, past the shelving unit, to the far wall without hesitation, without touching anything. A man who had planned for running. Who had just hoped he'd never have to. She stayed close. Her eyes adjusted fast. The red emergency strip from the passage below threw just enough ambient glow through the hatch seams to give the room faint shape. Generator. Pipes running vertical along the east wall. 2 shelving units, metal, industrial. A second door on the north side, unlocked, leading to what she estimated was the lower kitchen corridor. The route they came through, she said quietly. The panel in your room. Who installed it? My construction chief. He was at the north door now, hand on the handle, not opening it yet. Listening. Itaewon Lim, 11 years. And the room layout. The position of your desk chair. The time you changed your schedule tonight. She kept her voice low and even. All of that points to someone who had access to your daily movements. Not just the building. I know. Say the name, Seo Jun. He was quiet for a long moment. Outside the north door, the corridor was silent. But silence in this house was not safety. She had learned that on day 1. Silence was managed. Silence was chosen. Minjun Park, he said. My second in command. 14 years. The name landed in the room like something physical. 14 years. Not a new recruit. Not someone who had slipped through a background check. Someone who had been present for the construction of this entire operation. Who had watched it built, watched it grow, and had stood close enough to its center to know not just where the exits were, but why they existed. The system didn't fail, Zuri said. No. It was rewritten. From inside. By someone who understood it well enough to map its blind spots. He opened the north door. The corridor was empty. Dim. The kind of institutional lighting that existed only for function. A single strip along the ceiling, yellow-white, humming faintly. The smell of the kitchen above reached them. Cleaning product and something cold, like refrigeration. They moved. She tracked the sounds of the house as they went. Above them, footsteps. Not random, coordinated, moving in a pattern she recognized from the formation in the room. Sweeping. Methodical. They were searching the upper floors first, which bought time, but not much. When the upper floors came back empty, they would look down. Is there another safe room? She asked. Below the east wing. Reinforced. Biometric entry. How many people have the biometric on file? Seojun's pace slowed by half a step. She heard him arrive at the answer before he spoke it. 6, he said. Including Minjun. They were now inside someone else's plan. The safe room is compromised, she said. We don't know that. We do, she said. Because if Minjun built a counter to your system, the safe room is exactly where he'd expect you to go. It's the first place you'd run. He's known you 14 years. He knows how you think under pressure. She paused. Going there is walking into the next room of the same trap. Seo Jun stopped walking. He stood in the middle of the corridor and she watched him process it. The specific kind of processing that happened when a person realized that the mental model they had used to navigate their entire world had just been invalidated. Not updated. Not adjusted. Invalidated at the root. He had planned for external threats. He had planned for random betrayal. He had not planned for someone patient enough to study him for 14 years and then dismantle him from the inside on a Tuesday night. We have to move, Zuri said. Where? Somewhere not on your plan. She held his gaze. Anywhere on your plan is somewhere he's already thought of. Seo Jun started walking again. Faster now. They reached the junction where the lower corridor branched, east toward the safe room, west toward a service exit she had mapped on day 4. He turned east without hesitating. Not that way, she said. He stopped, turned, looked at her. Trust me or don't, she said. But decide right now. 3 seconds passed. He turned west. They moved quickly through the service corridor, narrower, colder, the walls unfinished concrete rather than the polished surfaces of the main house. She counted doors. Third on the left. She pressed it open and they stepped through into a storage room she had clocked during her second day. Cleaning supplies, linens, a second door at the back that the housekeeper had told her led to a disused part of the lower level. She had not told the housekeeper she'd already found it. She pushed through the second door. Beyond it was a short corridor ending in a reinforced steel door. And the steel door was already open. Zuri stopped. Seo-jun stopped beside her. The door that was supposed to require a code, that was supposed to be sealed, that was supposed to be the one location in the lower level with no biometric record on file. Standing open. And from inside the room, lit by a single overhead light, came a smell she recognized. Copper. Recent. Zuri's jaw tightened. She stepped forward slowly and looked through the door. And what she saw on the floor made the last piece of the night lock into place with a click so quiet it was almost gentle. Tell me in the comments, did you see this coming? Because what's inside that room changes everything. Raymond Kwan was dead. Not dramatically. Not with any of the staging that violence sometimes left behind when it wanted to be a message. He was simply on the floor near the far wall, his radio shattered beside him, his hands still positioned the way they had been when the decision was made for him. One reaching forward, one at his side, like his body had asked a question and never gotten the answer. He had been Seojin's most loyal guard. 12 years. The kind of loyal that didn't come from a paycheck, the kind that came from a man deciding, at some point in the past, that this was the person worth standing next to. Zuri stepped back from the doorway. Behind her, Seo-jun looked at Raymond for exactly 4 seconds. Then he looked away. Not from coldness. From something that lived on the other side of coldness. A place where grief and fury occupied the same square inch and neither one could move because the other was already there. He was supposed to be here waiting for us, Seo-jun said. He was here, Zuri said quietly. Someone got here first. The room had been staged. Not obviously, not the way an amateur would stage a scene. Subtly. The door left open rather than locked, so that when they arrived they would walk in already off balance. Raymond positioned in the far corner so the first thing visible from the doorway was the empty room, not the body. 2 extra seconds of false safety before the truth arrived. Detail work. Patient work. The work of someone who understood how human attention moved. Your system didn't fail, she said. She kept her voice even because the situation required it, not because she felt even. It was sold. Every layer of it. The panel schematics, your room position, your schedule change tonight, this location, someone provided all of it. Not in pieces. All of it. Together. As a package. Seo-jun moved into the room and crouched beside Raymond. He stayed there for a moment without speaking. His hand rested near the man's shoulder, not touching. Just near. Then he stood. The voice on the line, he said. When this is over. Focus, Zuri said. When this is over comes after we survive it. He looked at her. Something in his face had reorganized. The exhaustion she had seen in the private room was gone, not replaced by energy, replaced by something colder. A decision made at a cellular level that didn't require emotion to sustain it. His phone vibrated. He looked at the screen for 1 second. He answered it. The voice on the other end didn't say hello. It didn't ask where he was. It didn't perform any of the social architecture that normal calls required. It just said, you should have stayed predictable. Seo-jun said nothing. 14 years, the voice continued. Still calm. Completely, terribly calm. You never once asked me what I wanted. You assumed. You placed me where I was useful and kept me there and called it trust. The pause. Trust is expensive. You couldn't afford what it actually cost. The line went dead. The voice didn't sound like betrayal. It sounded like a conclusion. Like this had always been the plan, and the only variable that had moved off script tonight was the woman standing 6 feet to Seojin's left. Zuri watched him lower the phone. She had seen powerful men break before. Not often. Not dramatically. The way it actually happened was quiet, a specific quality of stillness that arrived when the architecture a person had built their entire sense of self on was no longer weight-bearing. Seo-jun stood in that stillness now. Not collapsed. Not falling. just standing in the wreckage of a certainty that had taken 14 years to hollow out. She gave him 8 seconds. Then, they're sweeping down. I can hear them on the floor above us. We have less than 4 minutes before they reach the service level. He looked at her. You said Minjun knew how you think under pressure, she said. That means every exit you'd choose, every route you'd pick, every decision that feels logical right now, he's already mapped it. She held his gaze. Which means we don't move logically. We move through the gaps. What gaps? The ones he doesn't know exist, she said. Because he's been watching you for 14 years. He hasn't been watching me for 8 days. The footsteps above them shifted. Closer. The ceiling vibrated faintly with the weight of organized movement coming down. Seo-jun looked at Raymond one final time. Then he looked at Zuri. Lead, he said. One word. No hesitation. And for a man who had not followed another person's direction in over 2 decades, the word cost exactly what it looked like it cost. Everything. Drop a comment right now. Minjun said. Seo-jun never once asked what he wanted. Who do you think was wrong in that relationship? Let's talk about it. Zuri went left. Not toward any exit Seo-jun had built, mapped, or documented. Left, into the section of the lower level that the estate's own floor plans listed as structural storage, a dead-end corridor that appeared on no escape route, no emergency plan, no briefing given to any guard on the rotation. Because dead ends on floor plans were only dead ends if you believed the floor plan. She had found the discrepancy on day 3. The structural storage corridor ran 31 feet according to the wall markings inside it. But the outer foundation wall, visible from the courtyard during her first week when she had been assigned to clean the exterior drainage channels, sat 47 feet from the interior entry point. 16 feet of unaccounted space. She had marked it in her head and kept walking. Now she moved through the storage corridor fast. Seo-jun 2 steps behind her, the sounds of the sweep above them filtering down through the ceiling in compressed, directional bursts. She counted doors. 1, 2. Shelving units on the left. Industrial shelving fixed to the wall, bolted at the base. Except the 3rd unit wasn't bolted. She had checked that on day 5. She gripped the right side of the shelving unit and pulled. It swung outward on a concealed hinge, smooth, recently oiled, which meant someone had used this passage within the last few months. Not Seo-jun. He hadn't known it was here. Which meant someone else had found it. She filed that and kept moving. Behind the unit was a gap in the concrete, rough, unfinished, approximately 2.5 feet wide. She turned sideways and moved through it. Seo-jun followed without a word. The space beyond was a maintenance void, the 16 feet she had calculated from the outside. Pipes running along the ceiling, electrical conduit, the smell of insulation and sealed air. And at the far end, a utility hatch set into the exterior foundation wall. Steel, flush-mounted, secured with a simple lever mechanism rather than a lock. Contractor access. Pre-digital. Pre-biometric. A hatch that existed on no security system because it predated the security system by 20 years. She pressed the lever. It resisted for a moment, rust, not locks, and then released with a grinding sound that was too loud in the quiet and completely unavoidable. She pushed the hatch open. Cold air hit them both. Night air. The smell of grass and hillside earth and the distant exhaust of the city below. For the first time in over an hour, Zuri felt the sky above her. They moved through the hatch and onto the hillside behind the estate's eastern foundation. Grass, steep, wet from the evening air. The lights of the main compound burned above and to the left. She could hear voices now, organized, moving toward the exterior. Down the hill, she said. Don't run. Walking speed. Running draws attention from a distance, walking doesn't. He was breathing hard. Not from fear, from the physical reality of the last 40 minutes pressing on a body that had been sitting at a desk for 3 hours before all of it started. She matched his pace and they moved down the slope, staying close to the tree line that ran along the property's eastern edge. You found that hatch on day 3, he said. Day 3 for the space. Day 5 for the hatch. And you said nothing. I didn't know yet whether the threat was internal or external. She kept her eyes on the tree line below. If it was external, telling you about an unknown access point made you safer. If it was internal, telling me handed the information to the wrong person. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. They moved through a gap in the tree line and the slope leveled briefly. A terrace of sorts, a flat shelf of earth where the hillside caught its breath before continuing downward. For the first time he wasn't in control. And somehow, that was the only reason he was still alive. The car, she said. I parked one at the base of the hill on the eastern access road. Day 5. Magnetic key under the rear wheel well. He stopped walking. She stopped with him and looked at him directly. Day 5, he said. Yes. You parked a car on day 5. I park a car everywhere I work for longer than 4 days. Old habit. He stared at her. Not with suspicion. With something that had no clean name. Somewhere between astonishment and the specific humility of a man realizing he had spent decades believing he was the most prepared person in any room and had just been shown what prepared actually looked like. Your name, he said. Zuri Adeyemi. Where did you come from before this? That's a long conversation, she said. And we don't have time for it right now. She started moving again. He followed. They reached the bottom of the hill and the narrow eastern access road appeared between the trees, barely a road, more a track used by utility vehicles and delivery contractors who serviced the estate through a secondary gate most staff didn't know existed. The car was where she had left it. A 4-year-old sedan, gray, unremarkable. Exactly the kind of car that didn't exist on security footage because nobody's eyes stuck to it. She retrieved the key from the wheel well, unlocked the doors, and got in. Seo-jun sat in the passenger seat. She started the engine. Above them, on the hill, a light swept across the tree line. A torch, handheld, moving fast. Looking. Coming toward the eastern edge. She pulled out without lights, moving slowly down the access track by memory and moonlight, and when the track met the main road below she turned left and let the city swallow them whole. Because the way out wasn't one he had built. It was one she had prepared before she knew she'd need it. And that made all the difference. If this story is hitting different, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe right now so you don't miss what comes next. Dawn came without asking permission. It moved across the city the way it always did. Not gently, not dramatically, but with the quiet insistence of something that had never once failed to arrive. Gray first. Then the specific pale gold that belonged to no other hour. The kind of light that made everything look honest whether it wanted to be or not. Zuri sat in the car on a narrow street in a neighborhood 40 minutes from Itaewon. A bakery across the road had its lights on. A man walked a small dog on the opposite pavement. Somewhere above them, a window opened and the smell of coffee reached the street. The world had kept going. It always did. Seo-jun sat in the passenger seat with his hands loose in his lap. Not the posture of a man at rest. The posture of a man who had set down something so heavy for so long that his body didn't yet know what to do without the weight of it. He had not spoken since they left the access road. She had not pushed him. She understood that some things needed the full silence to land correctly. He looked out through the glass at the bakery. At the man with the dog. At the street that knew nothing about him and owed him nothing and continued on its own terms completely regardless of who he was or what he had built or how completely it had come apart in a single night. I chose everyone in that circle, he said finally. His voice was quieter than she had heard it. Not weakened, emptied. Every person. Every role. I ran backgrounds, evaluations, trial periods. I thought selection was the same as security. He paused. I thought if I chose carefully enough, I was protected. Selection is the beginning, Zuri said. Not the end. Minjun was careful for 14 years. Minjun was patient for 14 years, she said. There's a difference. Patient people don't stop wanting things. They stop showing that they want them. Until they're ready. Seo-jun absorbed that. He wasn't wrong about everything, he said. And it cost him something to say it. She could hear the cost. I did place him. I did use him. I told myself it was trust, but trust requires asking. Requires listening. He turned to look at her. I never once asked Minjun what he wanted from his life. Not once in 14 years. Zuri looked at him steadily. He still chose what he chose, she said. Understanding why doesn't make Raymond less dead. No, he said. It doesn't. The bakery light shifted. Someone inside moving behind the counter. The small, ordinary motions of a person starting a day that had nothing in it they needed to survive. He didn't lose everything tonight. He lost the illusion of control. And gained the one thing he had never understood. What do you do now? Zuri. He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know yet. And the thing that made it different from every other answer she had heard him give was that it was true. Completely and without management. That's the first time I've said that about anything in 15 years. It's a better starting point than certainty was, she said. He looked at her. You saved my life, he said. Zuri shook her head once. I noticed things and made decisions. You did the harder part. What harder part? You listened. She said it simply. To someone you had no framework for trusting. Someone who didn't fit any category you'd built. Someone your system said was irrelevant. She paused. That's not a small thing for a man like you. He was quiet again. Outside, the dog walker turned a corner and disappeared. The bakery door opened and a woman stepped out with a paper bag, walking fast, already somewhere else in her mind. The city moved at its own pace around two people sitting in a gray sedan that nobody was looking for on this street. Not yet. But time was a resource and they were spending it. There are people who will want to know you're alive, Zuri said. And people who will want to know where you are. Those are not the same group. She met his eyes. Before you contact anyone, think about which group they're in. Not how long you've known them. Not what they've done for you. Who they become when there's something to gain. He nodded slowly. Then, who are you, Zuri Adeyemi? Actually. She looked at the bakery for a moment. Then she looked back at him. I'm the person you didn't see coming, she said. Most people aren't. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then something shifted in his face, not a smile exactly, but the space where one would live if the circumstances were different. The first fully unguarded expression she had seen from him in 8 days. What do we do first? He asked. Zuri reached into the back seat and retrieved a small bag she had packed on day 6 and left in the car on day 7. Inside, 2 prepaid phones, cash in 3 currencies, a change of clothes, a portable charger, 2 protein bars, and a first aid kit. She handed him one of the phones. He looked at it. Then at her. Then back at the phone. Day 7, he said. Yes. You packed this on day 7. I pack a bag everywhere I work for longer than 6 days. He looked at her for one more long moment. Then he took the phone. And the biggest truth, the one that would take him a long time to fully sit with, was not about Minjun's patience or Raymond's loyalty or the bullet hole 6 inches from where his head had been. It was simpler than all of that. He had built an empire on knowing which people mattered. And the one who mattered most had been standing in his corridor with a mop. The person he had looked past. The person the entire system had agreed not to see. She was the only reason he was alive to watch the sun come up over a city that didn't know his name. And sometimes, in life, in power, in the rooms where everything is decided, the person you overlook is the only reason you survive. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the most powerful person in the room isn't always the loudest one. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story that challenges what you think you know about power, loyalty, and the people the world decides not to see. Drop a comment below. Has someone ever underestimated you and lived to regret it? Tell your story. You might inspire someone who needs it more than you know.